In the 8th chapter of the book of Acts, Philip, the deacon, is led by an angel into the wilderness. And when he's in the wilderness, he encounters this man who must have seemed like he was from another planet. We call him the Ethiopian eunuch. So he's a eunuch. I really hope I don't have to explain what that means to you. This is a family show. If you don't know, Google it. But you should at least know in Leviticus 21 and in Deuteronomy 23, the scriptures clearly state that eunuchs are unclean. They are ritually impure. They are not allowed on the sacred ground of the tabernacle or the temple. You aren't allowed to approach or touch a eunuch because then their impurity would become your impurity. He's also from Ethiopia, which means he is almost 100% certain not Jewish. He's a pagan Gentile, which the early chapters and books of the Bible would say makes him unclean. You don't go near him. You don't touch him. You stay away as far as you can. In the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century, there's a group of writers called the early church fathers, and they write lots of commentaries on scriptures and sermons and books. And when they comment on this passage in Acts chapter 8 with Philip and the eunuch, they wonder, is this the fulfillment of the Great Commission, where Jesus sends his followers to go out to the ends of the earth with the gospel? Because Philip is talking to the Ethiopian eunuch about Jesus, and then the eunuch is presumably going to go back to Ethiopia and tell more people about Jesus. Now, I'm not saying this because I think that this is a fulfillment, and certainly not the fulfillment of the Great Commission, but because people in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries, and therefore probably in the 1st century, when they heard the place Ethiopia, they thought the end of the earth. They thought that like mythical place where on the map it says, "Here there be dragons." You look at a map of the world today, Israel's here and Ethiopia's here. They're like this far apart. But to them, this guy could not have been from a place that was further away. And so everything in Philip's upbringing and his religious upbringing would have been screaming in his head, stay away from this guy. He's unclean. He's a eunuch. He's not from here. Stay away. But Philip is being led by an angel and by the Holy Spirit. And so he goes up to the chariot. He finds the Ethiopian eunuch reading the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. He just had a vacation in Jerusalem, and so he probably, picked up the scroll of Isaiah at like a souvenir shop or something like that. He's reading it on his way home. Philip asks him, he says, "Do you know what you're reading? Do you understand it?" This Ethiopian eunuch, he's not from here, but he's not dumb. He's a court official of the Queen of Ethiopia. And so he could have been like, yeah, I understand what I'm reading. But he's humble and honest and says, no, how can I understand unless you tell me what it means? And so Philip says, well, actually, this part of the book of Isaiah is talking about the Messiah, and I know him. We're friends. He died a while ago, a few months ago, and now then he rose from the dead 3 days later, and then he ascended into heaven, and I'm a deacon in his name. I'm a minister in the name of this Messiah who I follow. And the eunuch then asks Philip, what would prevent me from being baptized? Now, if you or I heard this question 2,000 years ago, our answer would have been, what prevents you from being baptized? Well, everything about you, your whole thing just screams, don't baptize me. You're a Gentile. The church would spend a decade or two arguing about whether a Gentile, a non-Jew, had to first become a Jew before they could follow Jesus, before they could become a Christian. They would eventually rule that you don't have to become a Jew first. You can go right to faith in Jesus. But the faith, the church is only a few months old at this point. They haven't made that determination. No one's made a ruling on that. So there's one strike against him. He's a eunuch. The Bible literally calls this guy, because of who he is, because of what he is, unclean. He's not allowed on the sacred ground of the tabernacle or the temple, but we can all of a sudden baptize him? Has like someone made a ruling on that? Has someone decided that? No. And it's not like Philip has like spent months talking to this guy about Jesus. He's talked to him for like 15 minutes. And then he's going to send him back to Ethiopia. It's not like he's then going to go back as a convert, baptized, and then be able to join a church and be able to mature in his faith. There is no church in Ethiopia. Church is a couple months old. Philip can't send him with a copy of the New Testament because not a page of the New Testament has been written. What's to prevent you from being baptized? Your whole thing. But what Philip does is against every voice in his head that would have been screaming to stay away from him. And every voice in his head that would have been saying, don't baptize him. I mean, Philip's eventually going to have to go back to the church. He's going to have to go back to his fellow deacons and the apostles who are his leadership. And he's going to have to tell them, hey guys, guess what? I met a pagan Ethiopian eunuch. I talked to him about Jesus for like 15 minutes and then I baptized him. You what? He's got all these voices in his head. And all these reasons for why he shouldn't do this. But Philip jumps into the chariot with him. And then he jumps out of the chariot with him and into a body of water. And Philip baptizes him in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. It's remarkable. It's remarkable. So, the way that Luke tells this story in Acts, he very clearly doesn't say that Philip got up that morning with a wild hair idea and said, I'm going to do the most radical thing I can think of. He doesn't say, I'm going to find the strangest, the weirdest person I can find. I'm going to try and convince him in like 15 minutes to follow Jesus and then I'm going to baptize him. No. The way Luke writes this is that this wasn't Philip's idea. It was God's. Who's leading him? An angel, the Holy Spirit. The whole thing is driven by God, which is also remarkable. And it's remarkable that Philip didn't listen to all those voices in his head. The voice of his mother saying, stay away from strange people on the road. The voice of the apostles, be careful who you baptize. You did what? He doesn't listen to, he puts all those voices away. And he listens to the voice of the Holy Spirit and baptizes him. It's just remarkable. Over the past several weeks, we've been reading through the first epistle of John, and John's whole thing is that God is love. And in the 4th chapter of 1 John, we get that remarkable phrase that there is no fear in love, for perfect love casts out fear. These words are so necessary because we are sometimes so ruled by fear. And sometimes it's like knees knocking fear. And sometimes it's just like, I don't want to go near that kind of fear. That's weird fear. I don't understand that kind of fear. And in this passage of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, Philip so clearly does not listen to any of the voices of fear. He sees this guy who looks like he's from Mars or further away, and he loves him and follows the Spirit and baptizes him. The word religion comes from the Latin word religare. It means to bind, to constrict, to tie to lash something down. I normally don't like this word because of those connotations. I mean, Over the last 2,000 years or more, we've done a really good job of turning religion into this binding and constricting thing. Don't do that. Don't think that. Don't go by near that person. We look at the whole world with suspicion, and we want to just stay away, and worse to people who don't fit what our categories of holiness look like. And so I don't tend to use the word religion very often. I tend to talk about our faith and our common Christian faith rather than talking about our religion. But we could think about this word in a different way, that we're not tying ourselves up in knots. We're not tying ourselves up by our worst fears. But in our religion, we bind ourselves to the God who is love. We bind ourselves to the Holy Spirit, who calls us into all the world and to all people and to every people. We bind ourselves to this love that has no place for fear in it at all, and casts out any fear that might be left behind. I can get behind that. I can bind myself to that. I can get into that kind of religion, because it's the same religion that we see Jesus practice and teach and preach, and it's the same religion that we see Philip here enact. A kind of haunting question that I've thought about over the last week is, how often do I give into my fears? How many chariots didn't I jump into out of fear? Out of fear because the situation seemed weird, I felt suspicion, or I worried about what someone else was going to say. How many times? I could also think, and how many chariots can I jump into today? Where is the Holy Spirit leading me today? And do I have enough love, real love, that casts out fear within me to get into that chariot today?